Women are weird, men are strange. Redeeming the Time Brothers podcast, a podcast by Gene Kissinger and Norman Kissinger, two brothers who have spent their lives in ministry and raising large families. Our desire is to provide a digital place for those who long to belong. We are in a series called Maximum Marriage. We want to strengthen the marriages across the United States of America. We believe that much of the social problems that are going on right now flow back to a breakdown in this most fundamental of human relationships. By way of introduction, I remember listening to a comedian one time who said women are crazy. And then he paused a beat after he said women are crazy. And then he said men are stupid. And he got kind of the whole audience on board with him. And then he said women are crazy because men are stupid. And he might have been onto something there. We are all a bit broken if you look at both genders in the light of what our potential is. We certainly, as both genders, live far below the potential that we have. In fact, I would say that the fall has impacted both genders profoundly. In other words, God had an original design for both genders, but somehow, once sin entered into the equation, it damaged how we presented ourselves to the world, and then also how we related to one another. In other words, Satan was brilliant in how he manipulates us so that he will bring the brokenness of man together with the brokenness of woman, and they will match up perfectly to really hurt each other. And so we need to understand that what John Maxwell says, women are weird, men are strange. And we need to understand there are those differences that are there, and how do we get along with one another. Marriage, most people agree that marriage is a good thing, but somehow just bringing both genders under the same roof hasn't necessarily fixed the war of the sexes or the battle of the sexes. And so we need to be able to find out how we can get along appropriately with each other. Understanding that men and women are different is not to say that one gender is better than another gender. In fact, it's my belief, and I think it's backed up biblically, that God designed us to complete each other, not to compete with each other. And there's kind of a modern movement to sort of homogenize the genders to where there's really no distinction between them, no difference between them. But I would have you to understand that God made them male and female, and it says that in Genesis chapter 1. He made them male and female in His image. In other words, maleness teaches us something about God, and femaleness teaches us something about God. Both genders are equally vital in understanding who God is and what God has for us. And so these two genders are radically different. They're equal, but they're different. They're not the same. And as we understand that, that's going to help us to be able to figure out how to appropriately relate to each other. One of the differences between men and women has to do with verbal acuity, verbal IQ, if you will. Women are far more verbal in the main than men are. The bulk of women will speak somewhere around 24,000 words in a given day. The average man about 11,000. That's a pretty big gap between the two. Now, that's not true across every single human being, but it's just in the main or in the averages, you tend to find that women are more verbal and have a greater linguistic ability than men do. Women typically have a higher IQ. The average woman has a higher IQ than the average man. I know you ladies are already thinking, I already knew that. There are more geniuses among men, but there are more idiots among men as well. And I know you already knew that. But the average woman has a higher IQ than the average man. Men tend to have more muscle mass than women do. Probably about 20% more muscle mass than a woman on average, and then also 20% more red blood cells on average to oxygenate those muscles. And so there is a definite physical advantage, if you will, as far as lifting things or kind of heavy lifting, that sort of a deal. So men and women are different, and they're different. They have different abilities, different talents, different insights, and they bring different things to the table. And once we can learn to say "Viva la différence," long live the difference, then we can relate to one another without bashing each other for being different. So the things that make me different as a man from my wife, they don't make me better than her. They just make me different than her. And so if we can work along the lines of our strength, and where we both bring our strengths into the relationship, things will flow a lot better. So let's sort of break this down. Another couple of things about men and women that are different. They say that women have more connecting synapses between the two hemispheres of their brain. And your brain, a woman's brain, is more equal in size on both sides, or at least this is what I've read. I've never looked at a man and woman's brain, so I couldn't tell you personally, but some of the studies that I've read say that women have a brain that is the same size on both sides, and there's more connecting synapses between the two hemispheres, and those synapses are larger in women than they are in men. In other words, women are more attuned to both hemispheres of their brain. And those hemispheres work better in tandem. So they say that women recover better from strokes than men do, because they're more able to retrain another part of their brain to do what the damaged part did. And so they tend to recover from stroke better and more rapidly than men do, because of this physiological difference in their brains. And what that means is that women are more in tune with the feeling centers of their brain. So that I'll go up to my brother, and we're both got a little bit of a belly on us, and my brother here in town, we'll walk up, I'll pat him on the belly and go, "Hey, when are you due, big boy?" And of course, we'll yuck it up and laugh about that, but neither one of us are stupid enough to walk up to our wife and pat her on the belly and say, "When are you due?" Because that has a very different emotional impact on a woman than it does on a guy. And so we joke with each other in ways we would never joke with our wives about. And so, because they're in touch with the feelings hemisphere of their brain, and we're less in touch with that. Now, that comes in a little bit handier when hunting takes place, or when we have to go off to war. Men have a little bit of an advantage there, because they're not as in touch with that feeling part of their brain, and so they're sometimes able to do some things that might be more difficult for a woman. I don't know. I mean, it just depends on the woman, but I'm saying that there are definite gender differences that are there, and if we can understand them, I think we can learn to work together as a team a little bit better. Women tend to have a better intuition about situations. In other words, one of the things I've learned over the years is to listen to my wife when she's kind of got an unease about a certain person or about a situation. And she's usually right about that. She doesn't know why she feels that way, but she knows that she feels that way. And if you start digging into it, often you'll discover that intuition is an insight that was given to her because she's in touch with a different part of her brain that I'm in touch with. And so she's picking up some cues that are at a subconscious, unconscious level that I'm not picking up. And so I've learned to listen when she's saying something's going on or this thing is happening. I don't poo-poo her. I don't go, that's just silly. No, I've learned to listen to what she has to say about that. Now, oftentimes, women are able to live in the now a little bit better than men are. Women are able to live in the moment better than men are. So, if you tell a woman receives an invitation to a party, she's excited, man. She's thinking about what she's going to wear, and the guy's thinking about, how can I get out of that? I don't really want to go to the party, and so the women are excited about the nowness of this event that's going to happen, and guys tend to be off somewhere else. There's something about them that they're off somewhere else. So they may be thinking. It's not, a guy will come home and say, Tim Timmons, he came home and told his wife, excited they were going to take a trip to the Middle East for 8 months. His wife just said 4 things instantly. She said, how will we pay for the trip? Who will take care of the kids? What about the house? What about the car? And so she's sort of going, what in the world are we going to do? And he's thinking about this thing that's going to happen down the road. Now, he could have alleviated a lot of the anxiety had he said, work is going to pay for the trip. Your mom and dad are going to watch the kids. there'll be one of my friends is going to check on the house, and the car will be fine in the garage. He could have alleviated a lot of that stress that was on her instead of just saying, hey, we're going to take an 8-month trip, we're going to 8-week trip here in 4 months. And he could have de-stressed her by helping her in the now with these things. And she was doing her job. Her job was to say, what about these practical considerations? And he was thinking about this exciting thing that was going to happen down the road, and she was thinking about the now. Now, neither one of those things were wrong. It wasn't wrong for him to plan a trip, and it wasn't wrong for her to ask questions about the details. But what happens in most marriages is the two genders get at cross purposes with one another. It's like, well, you're never practical. You never think about these things, or you just raining on the parade. How come you don't get on board with this trip? I'm trying to plan this exciting thing for us down the road. And instead of fighting, they need to work together. They need to complete each other with their strengths instead of beating each other up with their weaknesses. And so one of the things that happens is men have trouble sometimes coming home from work and shifting into home mode. Guys tend to identify themselves. If you're at a party and you're introducing yourself and you're asking a question to a woman will often identify herself by her relationship. So she will talk about who she's related to, who her friends are, who her family is, and they will talk, women will talk to each other about relationships. Then men will often identify themselves almost in a singular fashion about what they do. So they'll say, so tell me about yourself. And he'll say, well, I'm a custodian. I am a salesman. I'm a project manager. I'm at whatever. And then they kind of identify themselves by this thing that they do. And so often when they come home, they have a little bit of trouble shifting into the home mode because they're still off in work mode thinking about something that they need to do there or need to plan there. And so one of the things that you can do as a wife is to sort of help your husband shift into this home mode and say, hey, it's so good to have you here at home. I so much appreciate you being here, reminding him that he needs to ground himself in home. And John Maxwell says that if he doesn't make that shift that way, feed him. Food will almost always work to bring him home, where he's really, really home with you and with the kids. Definitely a thing. Now, I already talked a little bit about the thinking and the feeling. Men at I don't know how many weeks of gestation, maybe 12, but at a certain number of weeks in gestation, when the little baby boy is in utero, the mother's body releases a testosterone bath, or at least that's what they're thinking happens. And it does some damage to one hemisphere of the brain, damages some of the synapses between the two hemispheres. At least it's what I've heard. And somehow that makes it makes us where we're more dependent on one side of our brain rather than bilateral thinking. So we're better at unilateral thinking. Women are better at bilateral thinking, which includes that feeling, imaginative side of things and verbal side of things. Women tend to be better at that. And so there's a differences in how men and women process feelings. Women tend to feel their way into a thought process. Men tend to think their way into a feeling process. And so if you're a wife and you're wanting to know what your husband is feeling, it's probably best not to ask him directly what he's feeling, because he probably doesn't know. But if you ask him what he thinks, and in the process of him telling you what he thinks, now he will have an opinion. One thing men are not short on is opinion. And so when you ask him, he will, as he's delineating his thought process, then you'll begin to discover how he feels about those thoughts. And if you want to know as a husband what your wife is thinking about a thing, ask her about how she's feeling, and as she's expressing those feelings to you, you'll then understand more her thought process. And they both get to the same place, they just come at it from a little bit of a different direction. And understanding that will help you to begin to be able to communicate more effectively with your mate. Now, these differences are true in about 80% of the relationships. There's some, so there's some women that are more unilateral in their thinking. There's some men that are more bilateral in their thinking. So you may need to adapt this, but you need to understand that your mate may get to the same place that you get, but they may come at it from a different direction. Understanding that may enable you to be able to ask them the right kind of questions to find out what their thought process is or their feeling process. And a couple of things. Let me give you a verse that we're basing this off of. Ephesians 5:33. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular, talking to husbands, so love his wife even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. Let me read it again. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. The primary need of a man has to do with respect. The primary need of a woman seems to be loved and cherished. And if you're feeding the wrong thing to your mate, they're not going to get full. So one of the things that you can do is try to communicate. If you're a wife and you want your husband to grow in the relationship, definitely learn to respect him, because that's one of the primary needs that he has. And if you're a man, you need to learn to love and to cherish your wife. Now, a couple of ways we know that we have these needs, but sometimes we come at getting them met a wrong way. Two wrong ways that a man will go at meeting this need for respect in his life. One is be this demanding, autocratic kind of, you will respect me, kind of walk softly or walk loudly and carry a big stick. That's not going to work. You're not going to convince her to respect you by being a bully. That is simply not going to work. And so if you're speaking harshly to your wife because you think that's going to make her respect you, you, sir, are headed the wrong direction. You need to abandon, abort mission, it won't work. But then the other side of that too, some guys intuitively kind of understand that, so they kind of go at it the other way, and they almost adopt too passive an approach, and they sort of approach their wife in a Casper milquetoast kind of a thing, walking on eggshells around her, and that doesn't give her anything to respect. And so you have to find some kind of a place where you live you are comfortable in your own skin, you know the direction that you're headed in your life, and you understand your strengths, but you're also cognizant of your weaknesses, and you have to own your own masculinity in that appropriate way. Then she'll be able to respect you in that appropriate fashion, where you're neither acting like an autocratic dictator nor some Casper milquetoast guy that's tiptoeing around her, because if she doesn't have anything to respect, if you're just a non-entity, there's nothing there for her to be drawn to. But then also the women need to be loved and cherished. And so, but they tend to go about it sometimes the wrong way. So that one woman may become like a clinging vine and try to sort of almost suffocate her mate into cherishing her, so that maybe she'll text him 100 times a day, or somehow she'll expect certain things from him when it might not be physically practical, or practical in the sense that he might lose his job if he's texting his wife all day long about how much that he loves her. And so this clinging vine the natural response, if something is grabbing hold of you and sort of drawing you in, it's not going to let you go, the man may respond by running from that and by resenting that. And that then the other extreme is this woman may almost develop the same kind of autocratic kind of temperament. Let's call it a Bloody Mary, where she's demanding to be loved. You will love and cherish me. Well, I don't know if that's going to work real well either. So the woman needs to come into her own personhood, where she is able to move into the relationship as an equal to the man and beside the man, and sort of come side by side with him, not clinging and pulling him, into an emotional black hole, nor where she's just autocratic like the autocratic man, but the two are coming together side by side, where both people are comfortable in their masculinity. The man is comfortable in his masculinity, the woman is comfortable in her femininity, and they're both able to come together and match up well where they meet the needs that the other one has. So one woman was talking to her husband, and she was talking about a mess that had happened in the back room that the kids had made, and she described it as a nuclear explosion. Man, a nuclear explosion went off in the back room, and she's very upset about this. And of course, he just went into sort of husband explainer mode, where he's going to tell her what she should do about the nuclear blast that went off in the back bedroom. She's not responding well to this explainer mode on his part. She wants to know that he cares that this mess was back there. Now, if she can sense that he cares that the mess is back there, she may well go and take care of the mess, but she wants to know that he's on her team. And not that she doesn't want 3 points in a poem from him. She wants to know that he's on her team. And so we have to be careful as guys that we're learning to listen to what our mate is saying, and to let them know that we're there with them and that we care that they're going through this situation, and ask if, is there something that you would like me to do in this? Is there anything that I can do that can help you? And then if there is, then you can jump in and help. But she may just want to talk to you about it and to know that you care very much about what is going on and that kind of a thing. The old saying is, to know me is to love me. And I think that we need to remember that one of the primary components to loving your mate is knowing your mate, knowing their strengths, knowing their weaknesses, not judging them or attacking them for their weaknesses, but instead bringing to the table that which would match up and help them to shore up those weaknesses, and enjoying the strengths without being bitter that they have this strong area or judgmental that they have a weak area. Instead, just going, this is, the wife says, this is my man. These are the things he's really good at. These are the things he's weaker in. And how can I come beside him and help him in those weak areas and encourage him in the strengths? And the husband, looking at the wife, says the same thing. He knows that there's some areas she's really strong in and she brings a lot to the table. There's other areas she has weakness in. And he says, how can I come beside her in those weak areas and help her so that we match up together and we make a dynamic team together? Your marriage was meant to be a dynamic team where the two of you are sort of, you got each other's back. And what I watch so often when couples that come and want to talk about a marriage issue, the basic thing, if I could just get them to do one thing, be stop attacking each other. Stop belittling each other. Stop criticizing each other. Stop, and start appreciating the other person. One of the things Gary Smalley, who was passed away just, I think, this last year, one of the things he said we need to get back to is this sense of honoring our mate, where when they come in the door, we go, wow, this person has chosen to be with me. All relationships are voluntary. Marriage is voluntary. Your mate could decide to leave you, could decide to divorce you. But if they choose to stick with you, if they choose to love you in spite of your flaws, we should go, wow, you're with me. And we should admire their strengths and help them with their weaknesses instead of attacking each other. There's an old saying that opposites attract, but it's also true that opposites attack. And we've got to get over that attack mode where we're building each other up. Ephesians 5, I think it's 26, I can't remember. I'll give the verse, you'll know it. It says, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace to the hearers. What it means is build each other up. Let your words be something that builds the other, not tears down the other. You're on either one of two crews in your relationship. You're either on the construction crew or the destruction crew, but you can't be on both. You're either tearing your relationship down or you're building it up. Make a conscious decision to be somebody that's gonna build it up, and don't just be somebody that just plays a role and it's like it's a game or something. Move into who you are and own who you are. Let God form who you are, and then come together as a team where the man and the woman are confident and comfortable The man in his masculinity, the woman in her femininity. When John Maxwell talked about how there's a little boy and a girl that they had a really good relationship with the neighbors, and they were playing husband and wife, and they were kind of dressed up in adult clothes, and they come to the neighbor's house that they go to all the time, and knocked on the door, said, we're playing house, and this is my husband. The 4-year-old girl says about the 3-year-old boy, and they come in, and the lady pours some lemonade for them, and they drink the lemonade, and then she offers them something else, and the little girl says, oh, I'm sorry, we can't, we've got to go home. My husband just wet his pants. And if you want to avoid the wetting your pants kind of thing, stop playing roles and really move into what God made you to be. Let's close our time together here in prayer. Dear Lord God, I thank you for this day, and I thank you for these that are watching. I pray that you would bless their marriages, God. Thank you for making men and women different. Thank you for making women life givers. Thank you for making men defenders of the home. Thank you, God, for the different roles that you give us. Help us to move into those without resentment or judgment. Help us to bless one another and to encourage one another within this thing that is called marriage, that we might give an appropriate picture of what the church's relationship is to Christ. And it might be a beautiful thing, not this ugly, brawling bride, battering husband thing. That's wicked, God. Forgive us of that. Help us to move into a place of wholeness and wellness. Help us, God, to create marriages that would draw people into marriage rather than drive them from marriage. That they would look at our marriages and go, I want what they have. I want that kind of relationship. And God, help us to exemplify what your word talks about. Thank you again for this time. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in today.